always like when our next guest can join us. It's certainly a busy time for him, the Commissioner of Baseball, Rob Manfred. Rob, it's Michael, Don, and Peter. How are you?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
Good. Now, I know you're heading to the game, and I know you grew up a Yankee fan. Are you hiding that while you're sitting in the stands?
I will be a very neutral commissioner tonight. It's what I will be. It's actually my fourth game this week, so I've had a great week all the way around.
All right. Now, let's talk about the season leading into the postseason. Were you happy with the way this season went?
Yeah, I really was. I think we got a nice mix of teams that made it to the postseason. We had some of our big market iconic franchises, obviously the Yankees, the Dodgers, Houston, but, some smaller markets as well, Tampa, Milwaukee, Minnesota. So really pleased. And, the races, particularly the races in the National League, went down to the last weekend, which is always great for us.
Yeah, I think baseball's really done a good job, Mr. Commissioner, of the revenue sharing and having the smaller market teams have a better chance to compete. But the other problem that now is arose are teams tanking, or at least teams not completely motivated to put the best product on the field. We've seen multiple 100-loss teams, non-competitive down the stretch. It's affected your attendance because nobody's going to the games in those cities. How big a concern is this, and is there a way to stop it from happening?
Look, baseball has always gone through cycles. Clubs are going to rebuild. It is sort of a product of the fact that we are a team game. You need 25 guys to compete, and in some markets, it is absolutely necessary to go through these cycles of rebuilding. You can't have 30 teams that win every year, and I don't think that the phenomenon is materially different from what we've seen historically in baseball.
Now, let's get to the attendance issue. Rob, it's down 1.7 from last year, and it's the sixth decline in the last 7 years. So I think this was the lowest attendance since 2003, a period of 16 years. Are you concerned about that? What do you think the reason is for that?
Well, let me say a couple of things about it. I mean, first of all, we drew 68+ million people in the big leagues, another 41.5 in minor league baseball. Minor league baseball is actually up this year. It's 110 million people going to see baseball live. And that is an astounding number in an entertainment environment where there is as many alternatives as there are today. There's more competition out there. We have to work to be better. But the game is fundamentally healthy, and we have to make sure that our product is as entertaining as possible, that we compete on price and value. But overall, I don't think you need to worry about baseball going anywhere.
Well, we have seen where there's less action, right? There's more strikeouts, more home runs, which are good, but less balls in play, spectacular plays. When we talk pace of play, Commissioner, it's usually that. Like, I want, when 33% of the game is a home run or a walk, you're not seeing some of the plays. Is that concerning to you, that the analytics have maybe made the game a little bit different?
Yeah, I think that analytics have changed the way we're playing the game, and I think that we need to be a little more aggressive about managing that change to make sure that we deliver for our fans the type of action that you're talking about, those athletic plays. Look, home runs are great. Don't get me wrong, but our research pretty strong in the suggestion that those type of athletic plays, balls in play, are important to us. And I think it's something that we need to continue to address with rule changes as we move forward.
Did you like pace of play this year? Did you think it sped up enough?
No, not really, Michael. I think that our pace of play is something we need to continue to work on. I think we have some really important changes coming next year. I think the roster change is a big deal for us. I think it's going to make September look more like the rest of the year, and I think it's going to speed September up significantly. I also, we haven't made a final decision. I still have to have a vote of the owners, but I'm in favor of the three batter rule for relief pitchers. Research, again, we are research-driven. We care what our fans think. One of the least popular things in the game is mid-inning pitching changes, only followed by multiple mid-inning pitching changes. So I think that's the kind of rule that we do need to embrace to continue to put more action into the game.
Protecting fans, we saw another injury a couple of months ago. How close are we to seeing that netting down the first and third base lines in every stadium?
Well, let's be clear. Every stadium now goes out past the dugouts. We've had 7 or 8 clubs committing to go even further than that, either all the way down the line or to the point where the stands jut out. I think you will see additional change during the off season, and we'll evaluate where we are after we give the clubs an opportunity to make those changes on their own.
I'm going to actually say something that's rare for a talk show host. I was wrong about something. When you had released a statement and said, well, it's hard for some teams to go all the way to the foul pole, and I said, oh, that's nonsense. But in the month of September, in places that I went, some of the places it seems impossible. I don't know if you could do it in Tampa Bay. I'm not sure if you could do it in Toronto. I just think logistically, I don't think it can be done.
Look, one of the things you adjust to in this job is everything you say, people attach a certain amount of skepticism to it as to whether you really don't. But we actually have had clubs bring engineering drawings in where for them to go down the line, you would have rigging that was in play in the stadiums. I mean, literally in the field of play. Look, we will continue. We have made a ton of progress on this issue in the last 4 or 5 years. We will continue to make progress. I remain of the view that the clubs will make good individual decisions on this, taking into account the design of their stadiums, and a one-size-fits-all rule is just a bad idea for us.
Are you nervous when Minnesota makes the playoffs that if they get to the World Series, weather can be a real issue there?
That's kind of like an IQ question, isn't it? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's an outdoor stadium in a climate where, it could be very cool and not have very good weather. But you know what? I'm happy when I see a club like Minnesota get to the postseason. Haven't been there in a while. It's an example of one of our smaller markets competing. I think it's an example of our economic system working. And I honestly think it's the best antidote to those people who talk about competitive problems in the game for their own set of economic reasons.
But it is ridiculous that's an open-air stadium. In Minnesota, where you're starting the season in March, where the season can go deep into October. And now that you're seeing stadiums that are only lasting 20 years, right? We saw Turner Field go down in 20 years. Can you, as the commissioner, would you have an appetite to say that from now on, any new stadium has to have either a dome or a retractable roof?
Well, look, I think that in certain climates, we would be very aggressive about suggesting to clubs that they need to be domed or covered. I think we have seen examples of extreme climates where clubs have had to make a change. I think the new stadium in Texas is an example on the other end. But remember, when Minnesota got built, they had been trying to build a stadium literally for more than a decade. And a roof is an expensive addition to a ballpark. There's absolutely no question about that. So we are concerned about it. I think that we would try to encourage clubs to make good decisions with respect to climates and enclosed structures going forward.
Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, is with us here on the Michael Kay Show. He's headed to the Bronx to see the Yankees and the Twins. Let's talk baseball, or specifically the baseball. How did the baseball get to this point where home runs are at a record pace, pitchers are complaining about seams and things like that, and do you plan to attack it at all during the offseason?
Well, we are in the process of awaiting a study that we commissioned by a group of scientists that we used a couple of years ago. We want to make sure we understand exactly what's happened with the baseball and understand the recommended remedies that the scientists come up with. So I do think it's going to be an activity for the offseason. I think 2 points are important to remember about the baseball. Number one, it is and at least as long as I'm commissioner, it will remain a handmade product. When you have a handmade product, all natural materials, there's going to be variation. And I think what people fail to appreciate, and I suspect that the scientists' report will make this very clear, minuscule changes in things like seam height. I mean, changes so small that you cannot possibly control them in the manufacturing process can have a material effect on how far the baseball flies. So it is a difficult problem. I will say this. I think it is incumbent upon us to try to get to the point without, getting away from a natural baseball to get a more consistent and predictable performance from our ball.
Now, you said anything you say is going to be put under a microscope and, looked at with a jaundiced eye. So you guys own the company that makes the baseballs. Did somebody give that company an order? We want the balls to fly out more. Why did they get to this point over 1 year?
Michael, it's honestly, I'm not going to prejudge what the scientists are going to say. The only thing I can tell you with 100% certainty, no one from this office has ever given Rawlings a direction to change the baseball in any way. We have specifications. They haven't been changed in years, and it's Rawlings' obligation. Before we don't actually own the whole company. We own a piece of it. But it's their obligation to produce baseballs within those specifications. Rawlings have made it clear publicly and otherwise that they've never received a direction from this office.
Now, I did the series in Texas, Rob, with Buck Showalter, and he brought up a very interesting point. He said everybody's blaming the baseballs. He said they should also look into the bats. He said the bats are harder than they've ever been. He said, and bats like ash and maple, he said maybe they should be taken out of the game. Are they studying that at all?
Yeah, we actually are studying bats as well. We have some preliminary findings on bats. I think the thinking at this point is it's much more likely to be associated with the ball than with the bats.
Gotcha.
If you were to look at it, Commissioner, and see that there was a certain flaw and why it was leading to the home runs, what would you feel? Like, all right, cat's out of the bag now. We've got to keep it the way that it is because those stats are going to look really ridiculous if we go back. Or do you want to find a way to make it a little bit more conservative if you can control that?
Consistent, you mean not? You mean conservative or
conservative in the sense of trying to get back to what it was rather than having the balls fly out at the rate that they've been.
Look, I'm a believer in the idea that with a game that people hold as dear as they do baseball, that the best possible course is transparency. And so when we get this report, we'll make it public. People will know what they find. If we feel we need to make adjustments, we'll make the adjustments that we think are the best for the game, and we'll move forward. People will understand why it happened, and they'll understand what the adjustments are that we've made, and it'll be completely transparent.
I read a story the other day that bodes very well for baseball and its future, Rob, that youth participation is way up. Was that an accurate story?
Yeah, over the last 5 years since we started the Play Ball initiative, our youth participation rate, and these are not baseball's numbers, there's an industry group that publishes these numbers, is up 21% in the last 5 years. We've been the fastest growing sport. The next closest sport has grown at a rate of 4% because youth participation in general is declining. We are the most participated sport if you put baseball and softball together in the under 12 age group. That's really important for us. And softball's been a great story for us. It is an important vehicle for growing the fan base, and we have a tremendous advantage. 46% of our fans are female, and we need to continue to grow that diverse fan base.
Doing the show, the biggest complaint we get during the course of the year as far as play is concerned is complaints about the strike zone. Now, that's gone back 100 years, but because most of the broadcasts now have the graphic, they see the ball outside the strike zone screaming for there being an electronic umpire, computerized strike zone. What direction is baseball going as far as that's concerned?
Well, I think been well publicized that we've been experimenting with an automated strike zone in the independent leagues this year. the technology has performed really well. And we do believe that we are close to having a system that you could actually use to call a game. It works by the computer making the call, but then, being communicated through an earpiece to the umpire. And we're excited about the technology. We think that the technology itself, fans will find to be interesting. And even more important, we think that ultimately an automated strike zone will be more accurate.
Rob, you mentioned the idea of diversity in the game, and so I think about that in terms of racial demographics as well. Basically, the black American ball player numbers have been dropping since the mid-'80s as the Latin players, there have been an influx of Latin players, and now it's down to something very low, 5-6%. What can be done in terms of this game to make it more appealing to young African-American athletes?
Well, I think the key on this front is to make playing opportunities available in underserved communities. We've made a huge investment in that regard over the last 5 years, and we've already started to see those investments bear fruit. The last 5 years, 20% of our first-round draft choices have been African American. That's compared to the 8% number you just mentioned. And almost everyone, I think actually without exception, every one of those players has some touch with a Major League Baseball program, whether it's one of our academies or the Hank Aaron Invitational down in Vero Beach or the RBI program. So we think you got to build from the ground up, obviously, and the trick is investment so that in all sorts of communities, kids, really athletic kids, have an opportunity to play what we regard to be the best game in the world.
Commissioner Manfred of the Major League Baseball is on with us on the Michael Kay Show. Two quick ones before we let you go. The story we had just before you came on is that the arena in Washington, D.C. is actually going to have a betting parlor where you could actually bet, and it's going to be year-round. Can you ever see that happening in a Major League ballpark?
Right now, our rules would prohibit that, but I do think, Michael, our rules are going to continue to evolve. We were not one that were pressing for a change in the legal status of sports betting in the United States, but it's a reality, and it is an opportunity for fan engagement, and I think you will see baseball's rule continue to evolve in order to take advantage of those engagement opportunities, to be competitive, to get fans, always with an eye on preserving the integrity of the game.
And final thing, I've known you a long time, and I know you're too smart to give me the specific answer, but when Rob Manfred looks at the 10 teams that are making the playoffs, do you have in your mind a World Series matchup that would be the best one for the game?
You know what, Michael? What I'm going to say to you is I do have one, and I guess I would say to you that I'd be willing to bet that it's not the one that you would think it is.
So it's not Dodgers, Yankees.
I'm just going to leave it at that, okay?
All right.
Look, I think that one of the things that's really important for us as a sport is the variety of teams that we've had in the postseason in the World Series and as World Series champions. It gives our fans that we ask a lot of, 81 home games in every market, hope and faith when they begin each season. I think that's a really important thing for us.
Enjoy the game tonight. Thanks for coming on with us during a trip here.
All right. Good to talk to you guys, and nice to have you back, Michael. I missed you when you were gone, so
Thank you so
we'll
much.
talk to you soon.
It's good to be back. Thanks. That's